Honestly, every time I try to do something fun or exciting, you make it not that way.
Is it okay if I kick your boss's ass? That won't affect your workplace chemistry, will it?
One man's toxic sludge is another man's potpourri.
All right, who did this? I'm not mad. I just want to know who did it so I can punish them.
When I get to the workplace, I like to fuck shit up.
Welcome to Let's Break Up, Toxic Workplace Stories, where weekly we interview people from around the world reflecting on their experiences in toxic workplaces.
Sharing lessons learned and providing a safe, supportive environment to share your stories with us and everyone else that may also be experiencing a similar situation.
Hosted by me, Nicola,
and me, Gina.
Both with many years of experience in the corporate world and now deep diving into the toxic workplace culture.
Each week we will provide tips and ways to identify and overcome some of the challenges associated with toxic workplaces. So settle in and relax.
As you join us in today's episode,
let's jump straight in and see where this journey takes us.
if we're starting this episode off, I think I think we need to say, we have recorded an episode where we have been confused about the episode, which we've been confused.
We have. It's been one that I know that you and I have gone back and forth quite a bit, trying to figure out the best way to edit it, the best way to get the story across, because we don't want to ever edit something in a way that isn't accurate to our interviewee's person, right, their story, or maybe just completely was in a place that it was difficult for them to navigate. They had been recently postpartum. So I think there was other factors, but I think you and I were both failing to understand why this would be considered a toxic workplace. Right. Yes. Not necessarily that she was the toxic one. And I did ask her, and I don't know if we kept that part in, but I did ask her at one point, like, do you think you just have an idealistic
view
of what a work scenario will look like, that everyone is going to get along together, there's never going to be any conflict? So it left us scratching our head a little bit. So
it did. And I think we then went to someone that we really like and trust, and said, just have a listen to this and give us some feedback as to what you think or where we should take the episode, because it was a really tricky one. We went over and over and over and over again, and we kind of tried to unpick it. And I think what we're going to do now is we will play the episode as we have it, play the episode that we were going to release, and then let's come back to it and kind of pick it apart. Because I think once we had time to reflect on it, I think we realized where the issues were. And I think once you've listened to it and you understand the confusion we have, then we can come back and have that kind of conversation around why.
Yeah. Do you think it might make sense, though, to, before we play our edited episode, to kind of just explain sort of the organizational chart? Because that doesn't happen in the organic episode until much later on. And I think it would have been helpful for us to kind of understand exactly what was going on. So Captain Harry was held, like, I would say, a mid-level position in communications. Then she had other coworkers on her same level. Then above that was a supervisor, and in this person's story, the supervisor was sometimes not there, so there was a lot of direct work between her and the director, and the director, right, is above the supervisor. And then of course the company was big enough to have its own actual HR department as well. So it was Captain Harry, the coworker who she refers to as Buddy, And then it was the supervisor, and then above the supervisor, the director. So I think that might help everyone before we play the actual episode.
We can get straight into it with Captain Harry.
With Harry. Harry
Am I
Styles.
driving the Hogwarts Express?
No, I feel like
I'm open to it. If that's the workplace that we're going to be talking about is the Hogwarts Express, I'm totally open.
Captain Harry, how did you find us? Or how did Nicola find you? What happened? How do we know each other? I need the backstory.
So my friend, so she told me about the podcast and she had put connected the dots. Such a shitty, I've been having the shittiest work experience. And I was like, oh, I need to talk to these ladies and tell them the shit that's gone down.
We need to know that. I cannot believe.
All right, so we'll start, you and me, Harry. Okay, talked you in, but we're super excited because we have our first Anon today. And she has decided to go by the name of Harry, and I'm here for it. Is it Captain Harry or just Harry?
I'm big on Captain Harry.
All right, so Captain Harry. I might end up calling you Captain just to shorten it because I'm that kind of gal. I'm an Italian from New York City. Yeah. So, okay. So you listened to our first couple of episodes, which we're so happy about. And we're getting so much good feedback, and it's really blown us away because this podcast was my idea. And I was like, I think it might be cool. Maybe 6 people will listen to it. And then it kind of just took on a life of its own. I have to give credit to Nicola. She's doing all the technical stuff because I'm not good with that stuff. But anyway, so you're our first Anon, Captain. Yay. And it's going to be really interesting because we don't know that much about you. So we're going to learn about you as we go, as a team, as a group. Cool. So why don't you tell us in general what the industry or what type of companies do you normally work at? And tell us a little bit about your background.
Cool. Well, I'm approaching my mid-30s, so I haven't been in any particular industry for very long, but for the most part, communications and marketing. I've been in the city that I'm in for about 8 years, coming up on 8 years. I grew up somewhere else and then I moved around a lot. I lived overseas for a year, which was really great. And then I came back and I realized I can't do anything with my liberal arts undergrad. And so I got an MBA. And then I had my first kid. And when she was about 1.5 years, I started looking for jobs. Because I live in Canada. So our maternity leaves are a year.
That's wild.
Actually, you can extend them up to 18 months.
Okay,
but
I mean, I own a company, so I didn't really take maternity leave, but we don't have that. We don't have that ability here in the States. I'm sure New Zealand has a much nicer policy than the United States. Pretty much everyone has a better policy than the United States. Anyway, we digress.
No, honestly, I feel like socially we're doing a huge disservice to giving parents shorter parental leaves, because ultimately we've learned as a society that the more time we spend with our children, the better they turn out as people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although now I run my own business and I basically have no life.
Same.
Yeah.
Same.
You get it.
Yeah, I do get it.
Yeah.
Okay, so your daughter's 1.5 years and you're starting to look back into the workforce, and what happens there?
So I had a really lovely interview. My boss used to be politically very heavily involved in the political scene in our province. He very much behind the scenes, but he was very heavily politically involved, still keeps up to date with politics. I met him and my supervisor, who is just about to go on mat leave herself. And the interview was so good. I got a cookie at the end, which
we don't, but was it chocolate chip or?
It was chocolate chip. It was good.
All right. Well.
I left. I was like, I've got the job. And sure enough, I got the job. Yeah.
Can you tell us what the position was, like in general? Like what was your position? What was sort of the hierarchy of the organizational chart? Just so we kind of get an idea of the key players.
Okay. So I worked for a health organization. So my role was a communication specialist. There was myself and then the director and another person who was hired. And he was hired at the same time as me. Yeah. And so our organization had 400 people. And we were meant to like deal with the internal and external communications for the organization. Yeah. So we had like other healthcare partners that we were supposed to talk to. Yeah, but we did like a little bit of everything, which was really fun.
So you mentioned HR. Was that your first red flag? Whatever happened with HR?
Yes.
All right, let's get into that.
Yeah. So initially, my director, he had promised me, like, because I was unionized, a higher end of the wage because I had an MBA. However, one thing that I didn't like that he told HR was that because he's hiring a man and a woman, he wants us to be paid the same, which doesn't make sense because I had more education and experience than my coworker.
Right, because it's not really about like equal pay. If it's about equal pay,
if
everyone's qualifications are matching, but that's still not equal pay because that means the man's going to either get as much as you, who has more qualifications, and then he's making more than he should, or you're going to make less than you should just to meet his.
Yeah.
You know? So that's not the right way to do that, obviously. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So HR was my first kind of hiccup because they called me. It was like 8:00 at night. I'm like nursing my daughter before bed. They called me and I'm like, why are they calling me at 8:00 at night? Oh, hey, we just looked at your qualifications and we're going to pay you more. Okay, cool. But why are you calling me at 8:00 at night?
Why would we call you so late?
Strange.
Are there no work boundaries at this point? How long have you been at the organization at this point?
You haven't even gone for your first day, have you?
I hadn't even gone for my first day. No, this was
goodbye.
Like,
Fucking bye.
Yeah.
But
I had like that was when I was like, I have a funny, actually, no, my first funny feeling was when my boss told me that he's hiring somebody else. And I was like, this is not going to be good. I just had this like alarm bell
like a
going.
gut feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I didn't have any particular reason as to like why the alarm bell was going off. So that was my first, like, what the fuck? Like, why is HR working so late? Don't they have enough people to work? So, and at the same time, I actually had another job offer and I turned it down. In hindsight, I wish I took the other job.
Yeah. I feel
but I don't know if I would be where I am now. Like,
that's how I look at it too. Yeah. But okay, go ahead. So you had another job offer. You start with this place, your salaries are the same, and he starts being inappropriate.
Yeah. My boss and I, like, as a manager, terrible. Terrible. As a human being, pretty okay.
If he's a good human, because quite often people are, what made him a terrible manager of people?
He had no interest whatsoever in managing us. So we came in, like, all of us were new. So the director had only been there for 7 months. Myself and this other person, he and I got there. Our supervisor was already on maternity leave. So HR screwed that up. It's not like they didn't know she was pregnant and like leaving. So they didn't like give us any overlap with her for her to train us and like kind of divvy up the workload a bit. So this led to some like very sudden conflict. Like within the first couple weeks, I start having panic attacks walking to my desk because this guy is like talking to a cop. So we're on equal footing and we're kind of left to our own devices to divvy up the workload, which I'm like, fuck, because this guy wanted to be the same brain and do everything together. And while all of this is happening, my director and I have better rapport than my director and this guy. So there isn't, like, the team is very disconnected in this sense. Like, I want to be left alone to do my own work without consulting somebody else for every little thing. And this guy wants to consult me for every little thing. it wasn't even 3 weeks in, and I start like writing down the comments that my coworker is making to me. Because
Do
like
you
they
have
were,
that list? I would love the list. Can you remember anything?
I filed a harassment complaint, so I can pull
Okay,
that up.
here we go. Buckle up, kiddies.
Oh, buckle up. So I started November 2019, and I filed the harassment complaint at the end of April. So we had already been home for about a month.
But like
you mean,
less
like,
than 6 months of being in the job.
Yeah.
So was it more bullying harassment or was it more sexual harassment?
0% sexual, just like
I'm here for the meat and potatoes.
okay.
Oh my
So
God, you need to make a flag that says I'm here for the meat and potatoes. That and problematic is going to be your strap line.
And yours is gorgeous.
You're gorgeous.
Everything is fucking gorgeous with Nicola. Everything.
Fuck you.
I could be like, here, try this burger. Ah, it's gorgeous.
I love that.
Okay, so I'm here for the meat and potatoes. Captain Harry, give me some examples.
Okay, so shortly after I started, we had a ransomware attack. And this guy, I'm not kidding, was pulled into they called it the war room.
Well, ransomware is war, essentially.
Don't even get me started. It was very stressful. He was pulled in, like they tapped him on the shoulder, hey, come like help with this stuff. And then very quickly after, like a couple days later, he was like phased out. And then all of a sudden it was like, I was taking minutes. I was in like these secret meetings where like we weren't supposed to talk about it. There was a lawyer there.
In the war room with the malware.
Can we just pause for a second for people who are not tech savvy like me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can someone please give me a rundown on what a war room malware? I mean, I kind of know, but I think for the people in the back, not for me,
the people,
for the people in the back.
For the sillies in the back seats, the peanuts. Firstly, just to be clear, malware, when you get an email that says you've won money from the Nigerian prince, you don't want to click that.
Win?
You didn't win.
No, I didn't
win. No, you did
keep
not.
Winning.
There is no inheritance there for you, babe. Please do not click on the button, because when you click the button, something downloads to your computer, and that is malware, and it can either skim your passwords or it can skim your identity, and it can sell your identity or skim your emails and then
so
email other people.
Like a data breach in some ways.
Data breach, yeah, essentially. Okay. And then a war room, what happens, and in many companies, not just government, but more government, because I think they like the term war room. What happens is they have like an emergency response center for big issues, which is called the war room. And then inside the war room, it's essentially Chatham House rules, where you can't have any communication outside of the war room. It's very closed door. It's very closed communication. You know, there is usually a lawyer, but that's part of the emergency response kind of ensemble to get you through whatever crisis you're dealing with. It could be a PR crisis. It could be, malware crisis. It could be floods, tsunamis, whatever's. Yep, there we go. Story of the day.
Okay, so you guys are in this like highly secretive like little room there, and so it seems like so far everything you said is checks with Nicola's gorgeous rundown. Okay, so what happens next?
So Buddy is pushed out, I'm brought in, and at the end of every single day, because I'm like not at my desk anymore, he'd be like, so what happened today? What's going on? And he'd like press me for information, panic, and be like, I don't know. I'm not allowed to talk about it. The lawyer said I'm not allowed to talk about it. And he's like, well, the director told us there are no secrets in this department. And it's like, then go talk to him. I started having panic attacks at work. And I started antidepressants by the end of that month.
Okay. All right. So what did your coworker say to you besides asking for information that he knew he shouldn't have asked about, correct?
Oh yeah, I had written, during one of the badgering conversations at the end of the workday, I felt attacked and was interrupted by a call from my husband. My husband had called both my personal and work phone. He called to tell me that my cat had passed away in front of him moments before. Okay. I mentioned this to my coworker and I leave upset. And my boss tells me to take the next day off when I stop by to tell him that my cat died. So then I took the day off. And then the next day, same time, coworker picks up this conversation, badgering me again. And he's like, why aren't I involved in the ransomware conversations? Why you, not me? You're not the boss. You can't make these decisions about like posting edits to some branding guidelines. And then I told him he's working on things I'm not filled in on. And like, it doesn't bother me to not be filled in on them. And that customarily people in the same position with the same title will have portfolios that don't always overlap. So I start like losing a bit of control with my emotions, and I'm like basically describing a panic attack. Ask him to stop talking because I'm just like done. I'm like, please stop talking. And he kept talking. And so I yelled at him to shut up. I was just like, shut up. And like everybody heard because we were in an open office concept. And then I left.
In this instance, were you the toxic person? Yelling
I
at
think,
people?
I mean, I think that's always something that we should reflect on. Like, what do we bring to the workplace that could potentially add to the toxicity? I mean, I know what I brought.
I know what I brought.
I brought Matude.
Here's what happened. I felt that my boundaries were persistently being crossed, and I would lay down the law and he would cross it again. And I had like told him with some assertion, like to stop talking. So maybe, yes, I was it was not my finest moment.
You know what? We don't judge. We've all had not great fine moments.
Yeah. And we're human. Like you were already emotional because of your cat. And then he's like annoying you about nonsense. All right. So this, I'm assuming this goes on for quite some time. Him just kind of like trying to extricate information from you and so on and so forth.
Yeah. HR got involved.
So what was the reason they were getting involved? Had you placed a complaint in around his consistent harassment, or did HR get involved after the office heard you yelling at him?
No, I actually, a finer moment of mine. I apologized for, I did not say, I apologized for how I reacted. And we had like a decent conversation. We actually like got along okay personally. It was just like really hard getting along with him about the work for whatever reason. So beginning of February to early March, we're like, trying to suss out our differences. At one point we made like a bit of an organizational chart to like divvy up the work. We were getting some guidance from organizational development, which was like, these were all like really positive things. I was feeling better. I was on my antidepressants. Things were okay for a bit. So we get to like, closer to the pandemic is picking up. Buddy is freaking out like every single day. So he's getting like ramped up about the pandemic. Like he has family in Italy.
Oh, that sucks.
Oh my God. Is he going to give Italians a bad name? Okay, so he has family in Italy and he's freaking out, rightfully so. It was a rough time for everyone.
We're getting like closer to him, like losing his shit. And he's like telling me he wants to be copied on every email I send. And I'm like, you're not my boss. Fuck you. You can talk to our director. Like,
would that be something under normal circumstances that you would do only about like work you were both working on?
Yeah.
Okay, so he wanted to be copied, just so that I understand, he wanted to be copied on things that he didn't even necessarily have to be privy to because he might not have necessarily been working on it. Okay, that's weird.
Yeah.
He sounds like a fucking nosy neighbor.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what it was like. He was a nosy neighbor.
Nosy.
Like, yeah, even my boss and I have had like, and this is where like the inappropriate boss conversations come in, but like my boss would be like, he wanted to fire him. And told me that he wanted to fire him.
Because he was weird or for like a real reason?
No, for like a real reason. He was like, his production was terrible. Like, yeah, but he's like, no, I need to know the procedures. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. Everything has to be like the same. There can't be any change. Like, change freaked this guy out.
All right. So he's freaking out and he's getting weird. So the boss is, honestly though, I've done that before. I've been like, this person, like, to people under me, I've been like, this so-and-so person is driving me fucking bananas. I would say that. And that's not cool. Like,
we know that's not cool. We know that that's your toxic trait.
So we get to mid-March and it's Monday morning. I come in, we were texting over the weekend. So I was like, okay, he's fine. Like, everything's fine. And then he starts like, I'm like, how's your weekend? Did you find wipes? Cause he's freaking out about wipes. And like, I'm serious, freaking out about wipes.
no, like the sanitizing wipes.
Okay. Hand sanitizer. He's freaking. So it sounds like maybe he's on the spectrum. You know, I'm not a psychologist, but I'm just saying.
Oh, no, that's a correct assessment. My boss said he was a narcissist, but I was like, no, I don't think he's into himself. So I come in, I put my coat in the like locker. Good morning. I was like feeling pretty good. And I saw he had wipes at his desk. And I was like, oh, hey, you found the wipes. Did you get the spray? And like something was off and he starts slamming things on his desk.
Like slamming like his stapler or like his like mouse and shit. All right.
Like slamming. And I was like, okay, whatever. I'm just going to go get my coffee. So I like turn around. We have like these little cupboards. So I grab my coffee and I'm holding my French press and my coffee. And then I like turn around with my coffee and he's like, I've had enough of your comments. I'm done. I don't want to hear them anymore. And I'm like, oh, okay. I was
Comments
just like,
about what? The wipe and the spray?
Yeah. I was like, what fucking comments are you talking about?
Okay. So
anyway, coming back to the story, back on track, kids.
Okay.
Meat and potatoes.
So meat and potatoes. So I go to HR after Buddy is like yelling. And actually one of my friends saw this. I was like, was I being an asshole? Like, did I do something? And she's like, no, you were like smiling and super pleasant. Like, he had no reason to freak out at you like he did. So like the day goes on and around lunchtime, I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go to HR because this is like, it's bugging me. So I go to HR. The director, also hired at the same time as me. I tell her what happened. And then she says to me, maybe what you said is the straw that broke the camel's back.
But what did you say?
Yeah, what did you say that was considered, I don't know, the straw that broke the camel's back? Yeah, strawy. What did you say?
Good morning?
He was probably upset about
Something.
His perceived slight, like that because he probably knew you were more qualified. He probably was like looking for things to be upset about, that you're not being, on like an equal playing field. And he just kind of like lost it. Because the one thing I've noticed is when people act out, and Megan, I taught this to Megan, and Megan actually mentioned it in her podcast share. It's normally not personal. He probably was so frustrated with something like
the wet wipes, the family, the minor oversight, the slights, like the fact that you were in the war room and he wasn't, like all of these things like tied together into.
I'm like sitting on this because like nothing happened. And basically one good thing my boss did was because like that week, I think we went home. And he entirely separated our work. He was like, you are not to talk to each other. Like, that's it. You're done. Like I will pass out the assignments or like delegate. And he had the organizational chart. So I think he like stuck quite well to that. And so we didn't talk anymore. So filed this harassment complaint. It took 6 months for mediation to happen. I didn't want to because I was like stressed out. I was like, I'm like, it's been so long. I don't really want to mediate. What's the point? Our work has been separate for so long. And my labor relations person kept saying like, well, you could be fired. And I was like, okay, fine. I'll just do it.
Fired for what though?
For not participating in mediation.
Basically,
I mean, I guess I can understand that though, because it's like if you raised the red flag to HR and then you don't follow through with it, it's almost like, what is it when the kid says they're sick all the time and they're not, and then crying wolf. Thank you. So, but it doesn't sound like you felt psychologically unsafe. It just sounded like you were just kind of like, I don't want to do it.
But it was a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. Okay. Like the week that I filed the harassment complaint, like we were all in lockdown, we were home with our almost 2-year-old, and I just like a couple times my husband, like he's an engineer, like, I don't know, he was asking me to do a few things and I was just getting like irritable, and I was like, hey, look, like, I know I look like I have it together right now, but like inside I'm really suffering, because like this was a really hard thing for me to like write and assemble and edit and make sure that it's on track with the company's policies, like respect in the workplace policies. So just like throw me a bone here. So we're getting to the summer, HR is like not making any movement. So it just felt so drawn out by the organization between April and October when mediation happened. So filed the harassment complaint. HR told me that they would get back to me within a week or two. They did not get back to me for 4 months. And then labor relations had to push for mediation to happen and for them to schedule it. And like, it was fine. I'm glad that we did it. It was hard work. Like, I can't deny that. And I'm glad that I did it. But I was also like newly pregnant at the time. And so I was nauseous. And then because my probation was a year in government here, which I know seems like humongous.
So you do the mediation, and then what happens?
Well, so around April, we were supposed to have our 5-month probation review. HR shit the bed, and my boss wasn't looking into what the actual like procedure or the truth was. And he totally missed our 5-month probation review. So we do mediation, and then shortly after we have our 11-month probation review, but we've never done a 5-month one. Right. So basically at this 11-month probation review, he didn't use any of the criteria from the government to evaluate us, like in terms of how we were working. And he had recommended for both myself and this coworker to extend our probations so that he could fire the guy and so that he could keep me. I was due at the end of April, and my probation was supposed to go until the end of May. My supervisor is like back at this point. She gets pregnant shortly after me. And this is like end of 2020. And she's really diligent and like on top of it. And every 2 weeks she was writing these like glowing reviews about me. Captain does their work. Like, this is great. And at one point I get seconded to like another partner, and they were really happy with me. Everybody is like really happy with me. So we're just like, what the hell? Why is my probation being extended for no particular reason? So my labor relations person was like, don't sign it. We're not going to sign it. So we file a grievance. So this is grievance number 1.
Okay.
And then, so this is end of 2020. Oh, so I meet my new boss in 2021.
Okay.
It was like disdain at first sight.
Organizational chart, it's you and your coworker, then there's a supervisor, then there's the director. So when you're saying boss, you're talking about the director.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. That's okay. No, it's just sometimes like if you're just listening to it, it's nice to kind of picture the organizational chart in your head.
Yeah.
So you two are on the same level, then you have a supervisor who's the intermediary between the director and your team of 2. Okay.
And
so
then you've got HR who is separate in a separate.
Yeah. Okay. I think that clears it up. So your director, who you're still kinds of friends with, leaves when you leave, and then a new director comes in and you guys do not like each other.
No. I was like, I think she's psychotic, because you know how you're like smiling and other people are smiling, and then like you meet somebody and they're like stone-faced the whole time and they look like they smell shit.
Sometimes that's my resting bitch face though. And I'm not like a horrible person. I'm actually kind of like a nice person, but I think if you were just to meet me, you'd be like, she is a cunt.
Can we just pause here for a second and remind people that if this podcast is something you enjoy, we would love to hear from you.
You can find us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube at
let's break up toxic workplace stories.
Sharing and subscribing really helps us feel validated.
So we all go for lunch, me, my supervisor, who is pregnant, and new director. We go for lunch, and like, I'm trying to bond with new director. We bonded over shoes. Like, you know, she's not really like a warm person. It's like hard to kind of.
Like a snake?
Yes.
Or like
snake.
reserved, like super reserved.
Is she introverted? We just had this conversation recently.
Yes. Could it be that she was introverted?
It's possible. Based on the amount that I've spoken to her, it's more like asshole.
Okay. So wait, how did it get to that level? Where you're like, no, she's not, like where you were like done giving her the benefit of the doubt and you're like, no, she's just a cunt.
So she made this comment and my supervisor is like, ready to pop any day. I have like my 2-month-old next to me and she's like asking, where's your older kid? And I was like, well, daycare. And then she says, I don't understand why women who are on maternity leave keep sending their older kids to daycare. Like, well, A, it's none of your fucking business.
Does she have kids? Because, babe.
She does have kids.
Oh, she does? Because I was like, listen, you can't fault someone who doesn't have kids because you don't know. That's another situation. You don't know till you know. Like you think like, oh, I'll be a fine mom. Like I'll handle it all. And then you have kids and you're like.
I was the best parent. I just want to say I was like the absolute fucking best parent until I had kids.
Yes. Thank you. Because I was about to be like, shut the fuck up, Nicola. I'm walking to New Zealand to punch you in your face and break your glasses. So it's even crazier that she has kids. So like what gives?
Okay. And I call HR, the one HR person that I liked. And I was like, hey, I think new director is going to fire me. I just said it. I just had like this very strong feeling.
Okay.
And my HR friend says like, no, she's just different. I know she's like a little bit this way. And so I told her what happened at lunch the few months before. And I was like, well, these were the conversations that we had. So I go back to work. And 3 weeks later I got fired because my probation was extended. However, I did learn because we had our grievance meeting with labor relations and the employer and HR and like, anyway, we had the meeting and I recorded it. What I learned was I have ample documentation to prove that I was a star employee and they have no documentation to prove that they rightfully fired me. And so the way that it looks like that it will look from a third party arbitrator is that they were just exercising their power because they could, not because that there was any particular reason to fire me.
Okay, can I just be the devil's advocate? And this is something that I learned from my business partner because he and I were friends way before we started a business, and I would complain about like, I don't know why my boss is having me do this, and he was like, you know what, Gina? When you're the boss, you get to tell people how to do it and why you want it done that way. He's like, but you're not the boss. So you don't get to do that. And that was a really big learning thing for me because I was like, I just have to be a worker among workers. Like it's not he's right. I'm not the boss. If I was the boss, I would know better. I would know different. Maybe there's a reason behind it. And then when I did become the boss, I was like, okay, now I see why my old boss did it this way. So what do you think there was any of that? Like for me, ego plays a big part in why I can sometimes like why I can sometimes contribute to a toxic workplace, like because I'm like, because I like on one hand, I know I'm really good at what I do, but at the same time, if I'm employed by someone, I need to do it their way or really show them why my way might be better, present it to them, and then have them tell me, we hear what you said, but you still got to do it our way. It's like, okay, fair enough. So do you think there could be any of that in your story?
Yes, there could be. Absolutely. That could possibly be the case. So when I came back, they basically hired somebody to do everything that I was doing already. So all of my work was gone. Like there wasn't anything for me to do except to like which like, I get it. I like, you go on leave, you come back, like you can't expect that all of your work will be there when you come back. I also learned in our grievance meeting that she had read the reviews that my supervisor, who was on leave, had written about me. So, and like all of the reviews, like all of the criteria was like meeting or exceeds expectations. Are you just firing me because I look different? Because you just don't like me?
Do you
like,
think any of the past like whistleblowing, I don't know if that's the right term, but like do you think that could have played into anything? Like, I know it's technically not supposed to, but once you know something, you can't unknow it. And it might have been like rattling around in her brain, like, oh, maybe, I don't know. I don't know what she was thinking. I don't know her, but it might have like cast you in an unfavorable light. Like, oh, you're going to go back to HR and like you're a snitch, you're tattle, whatever. I don't know. Something like this.
That's entirely possible too. Because my previous director knew her, he and I went for lunch like shortly before I went back. And I had like also expressed concern that I would probably be fired by her and that I was a little bit afraid of her. And his comment was like, oh, she's like not retired, but like on the cusp of retirement. She was fired from her previous workplace. So I had a friend who worked under her and had very similar stories to mine. And yeah, he was like, no, just don't be afraid of her. She's just trying to stay relevant. Like, yeah.
So did you complain about like the reason you got fired? Did anything, or did you just say, you know what, like it's my time to move on?
I did. Yeah. We filed a second grievance. So the nutshell was that the two grievances were related because the first one was an extension of my probation to an 18-month probation. And which meant that probation when I came back, which meant like new boss would absolutely have the ability to fire me, which she did. And then we filed a grievance for being wrongfully terminated. So the next step is like figuring out an arbitration date. I don't know when that's going to happen, but
so what is
this
your
is
goal?
still ongoing?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So what is your goal? Are you looking for compensation, or what is the goal for doing this? Because what is your goal with the arbitration and going forward in the manner that you are?
Ideally compensation. That would be nice. Like I calculated how much I would have been owed between the time that I was let go and now, and it's like quite a hefty sum. It's funny, actually, a friend of mine is a lawyer in another province, and she had sent me a similar instance that she had worked on. Based on the conversation that we had during our grievance meeting, they didn't have any like documentation to prove that there was any coaching or any like conversations with me about how I was doing something wrong. And I kept like everything. I can read you some of like the funny comments that were made in my termination letter.
Oh, please do.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm here for this.
Okay. Okay, the considerations upon which we have made this decision include 1, your ability to communicate and work compatibly with others in the organization. I was working from home and I got along with everybody.
I think that's directly discussing your previous coworker. I think that's what that's about.
Yeah. And like labor relations had said very plainly, like HR had written in their emails that I would not be penalized at all for bringing it forward. And this looks like a direct penalty. 2, your capacity to devote your exclusive attention to your employment responsibilities during your regularly scheduled hours of work.
Were you leaving early? Were you coming late, leaving early? What was going on?
I literally had
on the internet. Like, what's happening here?
I know. I actually had like straight up, like a doctor's note to keep me working at home. And like I had one side hustle, like writing articles every once in a while. And I was like, and I was very clear. I was like, I don't do this stuff on work time.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And then Your willingness to conduct yourself forthrightly at all times in matters related to your working conditions. Like, so you're calling me a liar?
Yeah, that one I'm not quite following, but
yeah, that one we had a hard time with, and we brought it up in our grievance meeting. And then our evaluation of your willingness to take the steps necessary to acquire full and clear comprehension of the core duties and expectations of your position.
so basically you didn't know what the fuck you were doing and you sucked at everything you did do.
Yeah.
But your other reports and like whatever reviews were all good.
Oh, they were excellent. Like,
so that doesn't seem to reconcile. All right, let's talk about, because I like to be a little like your husband, I like to play the devil's advocate. Do you think, and this is just my opinion, like whatever your coworker, it was probably a situation where you had to be there and really experience it to understand like how weird it might have been, but his behavior would just be, I would find it just a little bit annoying. Yeah. And I'd probably be like, why do you need to do, like, I'd probably just like say exactly what I would say. I'd be like, that's annoying. Why do you want to be copied on everything? That's so annoying for everyone.
Yeah.
So is there, to me, it didn't seem that bad from your retelling of it, but yeah. I was not there. And I know that there's something very different about being there in person. Yeah. So yeah. I'm coming from that place where I'm like, okay, it didn't sound awful. It didn't sound like he was like straight up harassing you. It just sounded like he was a weird dude, right?
Oh, he was super weird. Yeah.
Yeah, which fair enough. Okay. So do you think you might have been too idealistic about going into this work? Like, do you want a perfect role? Because you're always gonna, like, there was someone on my team directly that I didn't really like, but I made it work because like I didn't have a choice. I couldn't fire her. Like there was no reason. I didn't think she was very good at what she did. And I still don't think she's very good at what she does, but I had to just make it work as a manager.
Oh, totally. Yeah, we got along personally. That was the thing too. But like, yeah, it was just a lot of the like mansplaining type comments that would come in, or like, every once in a while he would say things where he like he would just like come up to me and be like, hey, did you know how much I made at my last job? And I was like, I don't fucking care about you. Like,
I would have said that. I would have been like, you know what? I'm sure it was great.
He just sounds very neurodiverse.
Yes. And I mean, like, what, you know, and it's not really about him, like, right? Because like we're only responsible for our own ourselves, right? We can't control like what your supervisor thought about you, the mean one, the not mean one. We can't control what our coworkers think, how they relate to us. But like looking back on it, do you think you could have done anything different? Would you still have filed something with HR? Would you have maybe gone to your director first and been like, maybe we should sit down, put some boundaries up? I mean, I don't know, just spitballing.
Yeah. So it was funny actually, because like, I don't know about where you guys were living, but like, a lot of people around that time, like late spring in the pandemic, were coming out with like a lot of harassment complaints. There were like several in my town about like different people that were relatively prominent individuals in the city. Mm-hmm. And my theory about that was that we had been so far removed from those people that we had time to think and be like, oh, that shit wasn't right. Let's try and rectify it. So in my mind, filing a harassment complaint was pointing out the problem and trying to rectify it, and hopefully for managing it, and for other people who were in my position to feel comfortable coming forward and trying to rectify the issue. But like, do I think he like bold-faced harassed me? No, he was absolutely annoying. What I think like ultimately was the issue was like how HR dealt with it and how it became very much like I was
instead of
kinda
dealing with the issue, it became targeted at you for raising the issue.
Yeah. My theory also is that because I wrote that comment about what the HR director had said to me, I felt that she was deliberately pushing me out of the organization, because I had called her out very plainly.
So back to what I said, like only you know how bad it was because you're the one who's experiencing it. Do you think the onus would have been on him or you to say like, I'd like to come, like, I want to come to you about, so this is kind of like how Nicola ended up getting fired, because I had a direct report come to me and say, hey, this thing happened. And because I was the manager, I just had to carry the message, and I did. And then of course it kind of spiraled into her getting fired. But in one way, that person did the right thing. Obviously, we didn't want Nicola to get fired, but her saying, hey, this thing happened, it's been bothering me for however many years at that point.
3 years.
Right. So, do you think the onus would have been on him or you to say, hey, this thing's bothering me. I'd like to take like 20 minutes of your time. I'd like to try to figure out a way to solve it. Because I'm thinking of going to HR, but I think you and I can maybe figure out a better solution before I have to make it go that far.
Yeah. He didn't really give me any guidance when I went to him. And I think that
Did
that
you
was part of
ask
the
for
problem.
guidance?
I did. Yeah.
You did. Okay.
Yeah. We had several conversations about this before I went and filed the complaint. The day that I was fired, I knew I was being fired because the night before, I was like suddenly kicked off of the Facebook. Like I just knew. And then 10 a.m. I got this like random probation meeting for 2:00. And like, so I called my labor relations. And labor relations said, no, I think it's just going to be fine. And I'm like, sure enough, I was fired.
So did she come? Did the labor relation, she did get there?
Yeah, she did. She was like, we're escalating this. We're taking this, like, this is going to be a grievance because like, there's nothing here. Like she had already had the reports from my supervisor from.
All right. Well, we want to thank you, Captain Harry, for coming on and sharing your story.
If and when arbitration happens, do you guys want me to let you know?
Yes, we need an update.
Yeah, we'll take an update.
We need the update in our lives. Regardless of if it's a good update or a bad update, we will take both.
Okay.
Because we want to know what happens. Like, did you get a favorable outcome? Yay, we popped that champagne. Insert champagne sound.
I think it's going to be a while, but
it probably is.
Or if it's not, then we can put in the womp 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 sound effect.
I hate you. That was so good though. Why was that so good?
Because I do it a lot.
Why was that so fucking good? You're so weird. I love it. Yeah.
We really
thank
appreciate
you so much for your time.
Yes,
no problem.
We really appreciate you coming to have a chat with us.
Tell all your friends about your experience. Tell them about our podcast. Have them rate and review.
Now we've listened to the episode.
Yeah. And I think it left us both with a very similar sense of how like how do we unpack this one?
And I'm also curious. I would love for the people that have listened to this podcast, I would love for them to leave us a voice message so that we can
love this voice message option.
I would love a voice message. Wouldn't you love to listen to someone's voice message?
Okay, in real life, my phone is like always on do not disturb.
Same.
Okay. But in this context, I would love to listen to a voice message.
Okay. So anyway, leave us a voice message because we would love to.
Because we will actually listen. All right. So, getting back to the episode.
All right. So now what I really appreciate is that Captain Harry actually sent us through some documentation.
Supporting documentation.
I'm going to pull it up right now and we can maybe just kind of go through some of it so that we can get a better handle on this. And I think, we spoke about this earlier, but I think what's happened is we've spent too much time focusing on the harassment and not quite understanding the harassment versus the failure for HR to effectively terminate employment because they did that super shady.
Yeah, and I think there's two separate issues. I think there was the perceived harassment. And I'll be honest, and I told that to Captain Harry, that to me, it did not sound unmanageable. It did not sound like harassment. It just sounded like this guy was neurodivergent, maybe socially awkward. It just seemed a little...
They seemed more annoying than harassing.
Than technically harassing.
I can also understand microaggressions, right? Like in the moment, you can feel the microaggressions and you can kind of perceive those to be really when they add up, they're not great.
Right.
And I wonder if that was the situation where we were dealing a lot with quite a bit of postpartum depression, so already super sensitive, and now you've got these not even I'd say negligible almost commentary from someone really annoying, so you're starting to feel even more in yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, I told her right on the podcast, I'd be like, I would just be like, you're, hey, dude, you're kind of annoying, huh? Like, I'm one of those people who will just be like, all right, you're annoying me right now. Can we come back to this later when I'm not irritable? So for me, I was having a hard time really understanding the true harassment. In one of her supporting documents, it does detail her version of the harassment. And again, we weren't there. We weren't on the receiving end of it. So we truly won't know. But again, in the retelling, it was hard for me to be on board with it being total harassment. And looking through that commentary though, reading through that commentary, and obviously if we read some of it out, I still feel like the harassment there is very negligible. It's a very gray area, and it's gray just because from the supporting documents and her retelling of her story, again, it just sounded like someone was annoying.
Neurodivergent, maybe.
Yeah. And even in the supporting documentation, it supports my feeling that it was just someone annoying. And I keep going back to it, but we weren't on the receiving end. No. So
but I also feel like there was a lot of sensitivity here. So I'm just going to call one out that I think it's leaving me scratching my head. Beep told me that he feels that men are harassed as often as women. I don't feel like arguing, but statistically, this is untrue. Why are we recording that as evidence when this is something who gives a shit? This guy obviously doesn't know what he's talking about. But
and also who knows what context it was in? I don't I think I would need more context. Maybe they were talking about domestic violence,
which can be very high, especially in New Zealand. That's incredibly high for men.
Yeah, and I think it's becoming more of an issue just globally, that people are coming forward saying, men are saying that they were also abused. So I'm sure that they weren't talking about that. I'm just playing devil's advocate, but I think I would have needed more context around it.
Yeah,
this was the conversation we were having. But I don't know if that's something that would be considered harassment. It just goes to show you how odd he is.
Yeah, and then I think the commentary and the conclusion for me, again, I'm I'm not 100% seeing it. It's in the conclusion of the evidence brought forward. It says the persistent verbal abuse, lack of respect, lack of trust, and the barriers that Beep has placed on all my work when we work together have made me feel...
Yeah, again, and I keep using this word, it's hard for me to reconcile that, because in no part of the supporting document or in her retelling her story was there any actual
verbal
abuse and or safety threats. He never pushed her. I'm not saying that it has to get to that point, but he never said, I'm going to come find you and kill your fucking family or something like that, which absolutely would be harassment. It's cut and dry. I think for me, it would have landed better if it was just something like it made it like a workplace that I feared coming to or felt uncomfortable working in, you know, something more along those lines. And I really don't want to feel, I don't want our audience to feel like we're throwing this person under the bus.
Oh, for sure not.
Because
for sure not.
we really like her. I really like her. She and I have some things in common, and I just think it's an interesting episode because typically the people who we're interviewing, it's very cut and dry. Like,
sure.
Okay, like this person like showed me their dick or whatever. Like my boss showed me their dick. Like that's
I got harassed. Full stop.
Right.
I almost got run over by a car. Full stop.
Yes. Full stop. Yeah, that's toxic. So I think it's I don't want this
gray
person,
area.
Yes, that we're struggling with, and I have a feeling our audience might struggle with it too. So we kind of are trying to bridge the gap there. In any event, I think, Nicola, you hit the nail on the head when the actual toxicity was in the whole probationary thing, which I'll have you explain because I don't fully understand it because she worked in a form of the government and so does Nicola. And she comes from an area that's similar to Nicola's. And then the final firing.
Yeah, okay.
Which I do agree it was unjust.
Ham-handed. That was ham-handed.
And it doesn't sound like there was any real reason.
So I'm going to try and like break it down as best as I can. And I'm not going to go into, I'm not retelling the story, but I'm going to break down my understanding of what's unfolded. So she raised this harassment issue. Nothing happened for an extended period of time. HR, now she was on a probation. She was on a 12-month probationary period, which is standard for that type of government organization. Within that probation period, it's very easy for you still to be fired because you're on probation. What happened was her probation was extended so that the new manager coming in could more easily fire her to recruit in the team that they really wanted.
So I think, yes, that is overall true, but the nitty gritty of it is her probation was extended because she went out on maternity leave.
Yeah.
And therefore she didn't complete the full 12 months of the original probation. So,
which in summary should have left her with a month additional probation.
Right. Like she should have just been able to come back and, say, okay, I did 10 months or whatever it was of the original probation and then finish the last 1 or 2 months and then have, my final evaluation with that to be off probation. And she does mention that one of the directors completely forgot to do the evaluation. So that pushed that, and her being out on maternity leave pushed her probation further, which
she had really glowing work, responses. So she had someone that was checking in with her. So she had documented evidence that she was doing a good job. And yes, there was a little bit of this hitsy fritzy stuff in the background with annoying guy. But it wasn't enough to create the momentum to be fired.
Well, we don't think it was enough.
We don't think it's enough. But to be fired, it almost sounds like a repercussion of speaking up. And I think that's what we should be focusing on.
That's the toxicity. And also the
toxicity.
Yes.
Not the harassment. And I think we spend too much time focusing on that.
I agree. I think the fact that I think it was two different things. I think it was her having spoken up and, filing a grievance against this coworker and bringing it to HR. And then also her and the new boss just didn't seem to get along right away, which is the flimsiest of excuses. Because you and I talk about this all the time. We might not like someone, like I have some vendors overseas who I can't stand the way that they talk or like how careless they can be. But at the end of the day, they do fabulous work. So I'm like, I'll manage it. Yeah, I just let it go and I manage it. So I also don't feel like that was a valid reason just because, you know, they didn't really maybe get on right away. Like they were only working together for, from what I understood, like maybe 2 months max.
Yeah. And it sounds like Captain Harry put effort in to get to know the new director as well. But it just sounds like the new director maybe had already a preconceived notion or some bias that we don't understand. I think that's really where the toxicity
is. Yes. So it was the mishandling of the correct procedures in terms of the probation, and then the new manager, or she refers to it as the director, the new director coming in and already knowing about the, you know, the labor action and the mediation with her coworker and possibly wanting to curate her own team.
Yeah. Yes.
So those are the toxic things.
Yes, that I feel like I feel like we've nailed that. And I think, you know, I don't want to go and edit the episode to be focused on that mishandling, because that's now currently going through arbitration, right? Like we're going through that process. But I wonder if how this has been sold is going to have the same effect on arbitration that it has had on us.
Yeah, like left us with a little bit of a gray, like kind of head scratcher.
Where it's like, I think that the arbitration itself needs to be more targeted at the lack of procedural kind of follow through for the probation and the firing. Because
if she hadn't been, if the probation hadn't been extended, it would have been much more difficult to let her go. Maybe she could have, you know, changed departments. I think the annoying coworker had already left by then, so that, you know, roadblock was out of the way. So yeah, I mean, I think we finally got to the bottom of it and where the toxicity actually lies for this story. So yes, it is a toxic workplace story. I just think we got too bogged down in the annoying coworker. Yeah,
I think so. And I think that's where we essentially got tripped up, which is fine. Like, it's going to happen. There's going to be stories where we're going to, and that's why I would really like some feedback on this episode, because I want to know if us kind of debriefing on an episode that confused us is something that our listeners actually want to hear as well. Like, do they want that? Are you listeners, are you interested in us debriefing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I actually think it would be really interesting to see how our audience reacts to this in general. Because like we said in the very beginning, like most of our stories so far and our interviewees have been very straightforward, very black and white. Yes, this is like a fucked up workplace and it's completely toxic. So
yeah, so I'm curious.
Let us know.
Yeah, please let us know. Please let us know in the comments. Let us know when we post the episode. Let us know on the voice recordings.
Oh my God, you're too funny.
Thank you. Anyway, that's the end of our episode. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Thank you for joining us today. If you would like to share your story, we would love to hear from you.
Also, leaving a review helps us create more content because it shows us there's an interest in this topic.
For those of our listeners who do better with reading, we have closed caption available on YouTube.
See you next week, same time and same place.